Today we're talking about Gabby Petito, a victim of intimate partner abuse who could have been saved if authorities had just paid a little more attention to her cry for help. Then we're moving on to a couple who appeared to have a perfect life, except that one of them was hiding their secret affair in the house without informing the other. After that, we have the legend of Marianne Cotton, the husband killer whose lovers seemed to drop dead like flies around her. But was there a reason behind all of that?
Brian Laundrie came home in Gabby Petito's van by himself to his family's home. That family, knowing that Gabby was dead, knowing their son had murdered her, knowing where the body was, and in particular, knowing that Joseph Petito and Nicole Schmidt were desperate to learn where their daughter was located, they went on vacation.
That missing persons case became a homicide investigation and then a desperate hunt for her killer. But mostly a hunt for her boyfriend.
To the world, Gabby Petito was a happy young woman. She had a successful career on YouTube, a happy relationship, and a bright future ahead of her. Sources close to Gabby say that she was just on the brink of pursuing her career as a full-time content creator and was working on a website to document her travels and lifestyle. But all of that came to a halt when she suddenly was reported missing in September 2021. Earlier in the year, Gabby had packed everything up and set out on a 4-year adventure with her partner, Brian Laundrie. The two were all set for a cross-country trip on their van, moving through different national parks where they were planning on camping out. The couple announced their plans on Gabby's YouTube channel and said that they would be sharing their entire journey on their social media platforms. Petito and Laundrie started dating back in 2019, and both of them quit their jobs when the COVID-19 pandemic started to pursue their collective dream of traveling. In June 2020, the couple was engaged. All in all, it was the perfect love story. Things started going downhill on August 12, 2021, when 911 received a strange call from someone reporting an incident of domestic abuse, claiming that a couple was violently fighting in front of the Moonflower Community Cooperative. The caller expressed their concern for the woman, who was later identified to be Petito, saying that her partner, later identified as Laundrie, had slapped her in the face.
Hi, I'm calling to report a domestic dispute. They just drove off.
What were they doing?
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
All right, I will let somebody know. Thank you.
The eyewitness also claimed that it seemed like Gabby was trying to fight back, as he was trying to snatch her phone and drive off in her van without her. The last thing that the eyewitness saw was Gabby dejectedly getting into the car, asking Brian why he had to be so mean.
But we want to know the truth if he actually hit you.
I guess, yeah, but I confers.
Where did he hit you? No, don't worry, just be
He
honest.
grabbed my face, I guess. I definitely have a cut right here, I can feel it.
Yeah.
I touch it, it burns.
The body cam footage from the police shows Brian laughing with the police officers as Gabby appears visibly shaken and unable to describe the situation. Ultimately, she ended up admitting that she had hit Brian first, and despite that 911 call, the police officers decided to chalk Gabby as the aggressor, even when she claimed that Laundrie had grabbed her face and cut her left cheek in the process. According to Laundrie, Gabby was being dramatic, and he had to push her to get her away from him for a minute. Laundrie suggested that both of them should take a breather because Gabby was just getting aggressive and slapping him for no reason.
In no way, shape, or form that I can perceive does what happened here, a little slap fight between fiancés who love each other, want to be together, can I perceive that this is going to digress into the situation where he's going to be a battered man?
Right.
But then again, I don't have a crystal ball.
The officers ultimately chalked the incident off to Gabby having a mental crisis instead of a possible domestic violence incident. And later on, the entire world found out exactly why this was the wrong call to make. The police made the couple separate for the night. But 5 nights later, it was quite the shock when Laundrie took a flight all alone, allegedly leaving Petito by herself. According to Gabby's mother, she kept receiving texts from her daughter until August 25th, which is also when she made her final post on Instagram, a photo of herself against a butterfly mural.
And we had just ended up needing a place to camp for the night and happened upon the Spread Creek camping area. And when we pulled in, we've got double GoPros. So we have one that faces front and one that faces my husband while he's driving. And as we're going in, he talked a little bit and totally forgot to shut the GoPros off. And the GoPros just keep rolling. And we passed by their van, or a white van. And the white van had Florida plates. And we were excited because, like, we're Florida, hometown Tampa Bay.
According to eyewitness statements, Gabby and Brian were seen together at a restaurant in Jackson Hole, where Laundrie was aggressive towards not just Gabby, but also the manager, waitress, and hostess of the place. Gabby would later return to apologize for her partner's behavior. Then, between August 26th and 27th, another eyewitness contacted the FBI and reported a white young man with a van acting very weird around the Spread Creek dispersed camping area. This would later be the exact site where Gabby's remains would be found. But how were the police led to what remained of Gabby's body? That's a story in and of itself. A woman actually posted a TikTok video after Gabby was reported missing, saying that she and her boyfriend had actually given Brian Laundrie a lift when they saw him hitchhiking alone. She reported that Laundrie appeared frazzled and offered the couple $200 for a 10-minute ride.
My boyfriend and I picked up Brian. He approached us asking us for a ride because he needed to go to Jackson, which we were going to Jackson that night. I'm hoping this can help someone identify him.
After that, another witness picked him up from the Jackson Lake Dam area.
There was this odd text message that sent from Gabby's phone, the last message to her mom referencing a Stan who is her grandfather, but the mother said she never calls her grandfather Stan. And I'm curious, do you think this is one possibility that Gabby wasn't herself, was acting erratic, or was someone using her phone? Where do you stand on this?
I was just going to tell you, it's possibly him trying to keep up appearances that she's still alive, buying him more time to be able to possibly dispose of the body, get rid of the evidence.
Around the same time, Gabby's mom received a strange text from her phone, which reads, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Stan was the name of Gabby's grandfather, and her mother found the texts to be extremely odd because she never referred to him by his name. The last message Petito's mother received from her was on August 30th, and it said, "No service in Yosemite." And then, radio silence.
For the Laundrie's silence, the Laundries did not help us find Gabby. They're sure as not going to help us find Brian. For Brian, we're asking you to turn yourself in to the FBI or the nearest law enforcement agency.
I was just shocked. I don't even remember how, I was just in shock. I was shaking, and from that moment forward, it was like, we need to find Gabby. And we just went into we didn't sleep after that. We just went into the mode of, get her face out there, let's find her immediately.
Gabby's family reported her missing on September 11th, and 4 days later, the police declared Laundrie as a person of interest in the case, especially owed to the body cam footage and constant reports of him being publicly abusive towards Gabby. During this time, Brian returned back home, and the police spotted him at his house on September 13th and then 15th. But what's strange is that all this time, his family chose to remain silent. And what's even worse is that Brian himself never reported Gabby missing. In fact, reports say that he was back home way before the missing persons report was filed and hadn't contacted Gabby's family about their daughter even once, raising immediate suspicion.
Earlier today, human remains were discovered, consistent with the description of Gabby Petito.
The FBI walking through our door to tell us that they found remains consistent of Gabby, and then having to call home and to tell our mother, my wife, who I couldn't even hold at the time that Gabby was found and she was gone.
And even though I knew that we were gonna find her, that was the hardest phone call I've ever had to take.
Just hoping that at that moment,
That she was in a place that she wanted to be, looking at the beautiful mountains.
at that moment, she found peace and was just looking at the mountains behind her, and maybe at that moment that she would just put herself in a better place.
Putting an end to the search parties sent out for Gabby, her missing remains were found at the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Wyoming, which is exactly where an eyewitness spotted Londre digging something in the ground. After an autopsy was performed, it was discovered that Gabby was killed due to blunt force injuries on her head and neck, along with manual strangulation. Her reports showed that she had died about 3 weeks before her body was found, which is exactly when Londre returned back home. With all this evidence, an arrest warrant was issued for Brian Londre when he was found using Gabby's debit card after her death. Soon after that, Londre himself went missing and his family joined the investigators to look for him. And if this wasn't proof enough of him being guilty, we don't know what is.
We're looking through wooded areas, we're looking through bodies of water, we're looking through swampy areas, and we're deploying the resources to be able to do that. We have air units, we have drones, we have the swamp buggies, air boats, multiple law enforcement agencies. We're deploying every resource to get through any terrain that we encounter in our search areas.
After a long search, his remains were found in the Makachiki Creek Environmental Park in a flooded area. An autopsy confirmed that he had died from a gunshot wound that he had most likely given himself in an attempt to end his own life. The police also found remains of what appeared to be his personal notebook, and to everyone's surprise, he had actually confessed to killing Gabby in the pages, even going as far as to write that it was him who had been text messaging her friends and family after murdering her to make them think that she was still alive and evade any suspicion. I ended her life. I thought it was merciful. That is what she wanted. But now I see all the mistakes that I made. Read Londre's diary. He then went on to write that he was ending himself not out of guilt, but because he did not want to live a day without her.
Why he couldn't just let it go and walk away, whatever the reason was for it. Why couldn't he just walk away? Leave her be.
Bringing a tragic end to this equally tragic love story, Brian's death and confession sparked a huge conversation about intimate partner violence with the public, majorly putting the blame on the police officers for not recognizing Gabby's clear signs of distress. Maybe if they had taken her to a safe space where she could have easily told the truth about the equation with Londre, the poor girl would still be with us today. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And if that woman is Martha Freeman, you'd better run for your life. Caught in a love triangle, Martha decided to let her evil side take over, and she ended up murdering her husband simply because she had had enough of a long-term, loving marriage where her husband was ready to give her everything she asked for. But no, none of that was enough for Martha, who wanted to spend the rest of her life with her lover instead. Our story begins in April 2005 with Martha Freeman, also nicknamed the Desperate Housewife, banging on her neighbor's door, saying that her husband had been murdered. She also claimed that the man who had killed him was still inside the house, wanting to kill her as well. However, when the police reached the scene, they were surprised to find out that Jeffrey Freeman had been dead for more than 16 hours, and the man who had killed him was none other than Martha's former lover, who had allegedly been living inside the couple's home for months, hiding out in a closet. And the worst part? Martha knew all about it. Martha Freeman and Rafael de Jesus Rocha Perez were madly in love. The only problem was that Martha was married to Jeffrey, and the two had quite a happy life together. But we all have skeletons in our closet, and Martha's skeleton was a living and breathing man. Jeffrey lived in a 2x8 foot storage space in the couple's home, where Martha had given him a foam pad to sleep on, plenty of pillows and blankets. She would regularly give him food and bring him newspapers to help him fight the boredom when she wasn't around. Upon investigation, the police also found a Nintendo Game Boy and an overnight bag with lingerie and various pictures of Martha, proving that this was all consensual and in her knowledge this whole time, unlike what she claimed to the authorities. While no one knows the timeline of this romance, what we can say is that Martha and Perez were definitely in a relationship, and while initially only Perez was charged with Jeffrey's murder, the police had plenty of reason to believe that Martha was involved.
She was very calm, very matter of fact, and was able to give details. A young man approached us and said that his wife had seen a Hispanic male running down the road and gone into this house that was under construction.
On the other hand, Perez also went on to claim that Martha had set her up after killing her own husband because she was sick of their marriage. So what was the real truth? Martha claims that she met Perez back in 2004 when she was going through a tough time in her marriage. The two ended up going to a hotel and developed an intimate relationship with each other. Despite the fact that Perez couldn't speak English, the two used a translator to communicate and kept their fling going on and off. In 2005, they decided to take things to a brand new level of weird, and Perez moved into the closet of Martha and her husband Jeffrey's home to continue their love affair.
Her statement was that about a month before the murder, that Mr. Rocha Perez had actually moved into the residence.
Was he staying on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm.
And he was staying in your room?
In the closet.
However, on the night of April 10th, 2005, Jeffrey discovered the couple and walked in on them in the closet that Martha had hidden Perez in. After being visibly upset at his wife's unfaithfulness, Jeffrey had asked Perez to leave.
You think Christian woke up and heard the word police?
Oh, I know he did.
What was his reaction?
His reaction was swift. His reaction was to grab the gun, grab my husband by the collar, threaten him.
Jeffrey himself went out for some fresh air and to walk the dogs, and when he returned back, Perez decided to take all of his anger out on him. So he grabbed Jeffrey by the shirt collar and forced him into the bathroom at gunpoint. According to Martha, she was waiting outside, waiting for all of this to end. All this while, she heard sounds of an altercation between the two men. However, what the police find suspicious is that while all of this was happening and her husband's life was in apparent danger, she never even thought about calling the police.
I heard a lot of thumping, a lot of noise, and I was terrified. I was in the other room just with my hands over my head, just in absolute fear.
Evidence suggests that while Perez was beating Jeffrey up, Martha calmly walked over to Walgreens to pick up her prescription. She walked her dog twice and even called her husband's parents to tell them that Jeffrey wasn't feeling so well and wouldn't be able to talk to them. At the end of it all, 16 hours later, when Jeffrey was gone for good, she went to her neighbors and asked them to call the police.
It was not a knock, 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 but sort of a bam, bam, bam. She took the screen door, opened it, and walked straight past me. She doesn't look me in the eye, but she says, "A man killed my husband."
Martha's double life was also a reason for the police to be suspicious of her, because if she can keep up a charade in front of her husband while hiding her lover in the same home, who knows what else she could do. Jeffrey's body was discovered in the bathroom, wet and half stuffed in a sleeping bag, with a black trash bag wrapped around his face. The medical examiners confirmed that the 44-year-old victim had been beaten up on his head and face and was strangled after his hands and legs were tied up. The investigation also showed that Perez was an illegal immigrant living in America, which further strengthened Martha's claims against her lover.
What was his reaction?
His reaction was swift. His reaction was to grab the gun, grab my husband by the collar, threaten him.
Then
I heard water and I heard thumping.
But obviously, things were not as simple as they seem. During the trial, Martha claimed that it was only her lover who had killed her husband. She also went on to talk about her mental illnesses and claimed that her medication often clouded her judgment, which is why she wasn't able to report the murder in time. And while all the evidence was pointing towards the fact that Perez did kill Jeffrey, the prosecutors believed that both him and Martha worked it out together to put an end to the man who is coming in the way of their love. The investigation also showed that Jeffrey was never even able to struggle against his murderer because he had a shotgun that was constantly pointed at him. And while it was Perez who had beaten him up, it definitely would have taken both him and his lover to move the victim's body out of the bathtub that was overflowing with water. And not to mention the shady call that Martha had made to Jeffrey's family, which was the terrifying cherry on top of this horrifying case. To this day, there have been no conclusive answers as to who really killed Jeffrey Freeman, but the authorities do believe that Martha needs to be investigated closely. She was actually indicted on one count of first-degree murder, but then was let out on bail, while her former lover is still behind bars. As far as Jeffrey goes, imagine finding out that your wife was cheating on you and being murdered all on the same night. What a tragic love story.
These forbidding walls once stood witness to the hanging of a wife and mother. Her crime was the arsenic poisoning of a child.
Known to be the first serial killer in the history of Britain, Mary Ann Cotton, also known as the Black Widow, was the wife of every man's nightmares. Over the course of a decade, Mary Ann poisoned and murdered one husband after the other for their insurance money. And what's even more brutal is that she didn't spare anyone who got in the way of her and her money, not even 11 of her own children. Here's the story of the most ruthless woman in history. Mary Ann Cotton was born in 1832 and worked as a nurse and dressmaker before her first ever marriage to William Mabray in 1852. The two lived a normal life, but when 4 of their 5 children died of gastric fever, Mowbray decided to purchase a life insurance policy to make sure that his family would be supported if he was to pass away. And almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, Mowbray and the 2 of his remaining children passed away from the same condition, with no one but Mary left to collect the insurance money. She then married a man named George Ward, who dropped dead a year later. Once again, Mary was the sole receiver of his life insurance payout. Surprisingly, these tragedies weren't enough to put Mary off of the idea of love, and she married her 3rd husband, James Robinson. According to the Robinsons' family, his wife pressurized him to take out a life insurance policy after the death of their 4 children. But because he refused to do so, Mary ended up leaving him and marrying another man in 1870, who once again died under mysterious circumstances, leaving Mary with all of this life insurance money. At this point, the police knew that Mary was the one behind all of these strange deaths. But how did she manage to do it without a single trace? Simple. She used arsenic, which mimics the exact symptoms of gastric fever and was impossible to detect in the human body back in the day. To quench her thirst for money, Mary is known to have killed over 15 of her direct family members, which just goes on to show how heartless she really was. She would charm men into marrying her, playing the role of the perfect wife. She would then feign concerns and push her husbands into buying life insurance policies. And that's when her plan would kick off. She would slowly start poisoning them with the arsenic, and if the policy was also in the name of her children, she would do the same to them. Mary would target rich men and trap them into falling in love with her before she took their lives and all the money that they had, not even caring for her own children.
Perhaps she thought that she was untouchable and she'd never be convicted.
Mary Ann was caught after the death of her 4th husband, Frederick Cotton, from what appeared to be the same kind of gastric fever. However, this death was too much for the authorities to take, and they decided to investigate what was really going on once and for all.
They really were a kind of rough and ready, open forum kind of public justice. And there would be a jury of men, who would be summoned by the coroner. Now, this jury, they would hear evidence from witnesses, they would hear medical evidence, and they would come to a conclusion as to how a death had actually come about.
When questioned, Mary mentioned that Charles must have died from all the arsenic in the wallpaper in their house. But when the police started counting all the deaths that occurred under her roof and under her care, the evidence was way too overwhelming to be ignored. After one of Cotton's lover's bodies was exhumed for evidence, the police found traces of poison in his blood, and that was all the evidence they needed to believe that Mary was responsible for the death of not just one, but over 15 people. However, Mary maintained her innocence until the very last minute.
They called in a much more highly qualified doctor called Scattergood, Dr. Scattergood from Leeds, who was a proper toxicologist, and he did a series of tests and found that there was arsenic all over Charles Edward's body.
On March 24th, 1873, Mary Ann Cotton was hanged for her crimes, bringing justice to all the lives that she had unfairly taken.
Her executioner was William Calcraft, one of the worst hangmen ever lived.
He favoured the short drop method of hanging. The advantage of that is that you don't accidentally pull the head off the victim. That was good from the point of view of the hangman because it meant that the clothes of the victim were not covered in blood, and traditionally these clothes were inherited by the hangman, who would then sell them off as souvenirs.
And while Mary was officially only convicted for just one death, it's believed that the total number of her victims was stretched way beyond 21. And while she never really went down in history as a famous serial killer, what most people don't know is that her death toll is even higher than Jack the Ripper's, which truly makes her the most terrifying woman in history.